Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Some Democrats say that Republicans should vote for this package if they care about deficit reduction.
You want to look at
Would
him?
Republicans support this package if it didn't have any new government spending and it just addressed deficit reduction? And then I have a second question.
I'm sure others would have comments, but let me point out that they say that it will reduce by $200 to $200 billion. Okay, our economy, that's about 0.8 to 1.2 of our nation's GDP every year. They're going to reduce that over 10 years. It is going to be less than a fraction of 0.04% of our 0.04%, roughly 0.08 of our nation's GDP. What's that?
If things go perfect.
If things go perfectly. Now, and then the debt and deficit, this will be a total rounding error. So if that's what they're using to justify, and if that's their strongest argument, it's a pretty weak, strong argument.
And my follow-up is, do you think Democrats truly care about reducing the deficit, or this is a way to justify billions in new government spending for things that they want?
I don't think they care, and I think they're only trying to get a fig leaf to justify billions of new spending. John?
Lindsay has a...
Yeah, so this is an important question. The deficit saving estimate is down to $100 billion, I think over a 10-year period. See, the gimmicks in Build Back Better were exposed, and that's why they lost Manchin. The House claimed Build Back Better cost $1.7 trillion. I asked CBO, if you took all the gimmicks out, if you made the child tax credit for 10 years, not 2, which we know it would be, about every new program they introduced was limited to 2 or 3 years, which was a lie. If you play it out over 10 years, the actual cost of the bill was $5.9 trillion. When it came to adding to the deficit, they said it was $238 billion. Well, when you do away with all the gimmicks, the deficit went almost to $3 trillion. In this bill, there's a gimmick here. They have a limit on the Obamacare subsidy. Now, the Obamacare subsidy in this bill goes up to families of 4 making $304,000. So if they take money away from Medicare to give a subsidy to a family making $300,000, well, that program is supposed to go away in 3 years. It's not going to go away. If you play it out over 10 years, this adds to the deficit.
Senator Graham, can you walk through your vote-a-rama strategy, Senator
I'll let him do that.
Okay. Where do you see any real effort?
Well, I'll turn it over to John.
Scuttle the bill, and how long do you see
Okay, so here's where I'm at. Okay, I vote for the gun legislation, thinking that we ought to do some things to keep guns out of the hands of unstable people. A lot of people on my side didn't agree, but it made sense to me. I voted for the infrastructure bill. As Build Back Better was a disaster, it made sense to me. I think you voted for it, right? So I've tried to work with them where I can. I voted for the CHIPS bill. It was far more expensive than it should have been because I think we need to make chips here, not just rely on foreign chip manufacturers. And you make a good point. I get all that. Before the ink is dry on that bill, they drop this. So what will vote-a-rama be like? It'll be like hell. They deserve this. As much as I admire Joe Manchin and Sinema for standing up to the radical left at times, they're empowering legislation that will make the average person's life more difficult at a time they can't afford higher gas taxes. They're going to get it. At a time we create jobs, it's going to be harder because the incentives to do so are gone. So I'm hoping that we can come up with proposals that will make sense to a few of them, and they will abandon this jihad they're on to tax and spend. But I just turn it over to John now, but to Joe Manchin, you have a game plan that counts on something you need to really think long and hard about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to add to that. I think that these votes are going to be hard votes for the Democrats, and I think the question for both Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema is, if any of these amendments succeed at the end, will you or will you not vote for the wraparound amendment? Because they both said that they won't vote after they felt like in the American Rescue Plan they voted for a wraparound amendment and felt like they were misled by their leadership at the time that they would never vote for one of those again. So if we have some success with amendments through this process, and we will be targeting certain areas of the bill, the question is at the end, are those amendments going to be amendments that actually might change the bill, could make it better, might make it harder to pass in the House, who knows? But we've got a series of amendments, and they aren't going to be easy, but I think we kind of expected the Democrats to fall in because, as has been pointed out by my colleagues here, that it's an article of faith with Democrats that when they have power, they're going to raise taxes, they're going to spend money, and they're going to grow government. I mean, that's what they do, and they did that last year, and they're going to try and do it again right now. But we're obviously going to make those votes hard votes.
It almost sounds as though that there's like a red line that you feel that they've crossed. Senator Graham, you've talked about them working with them on these other issues, but when it comes down to these two senators, it almost sounds like they crossed you personally. You use the word
All I'm saying is, listen, okay, the American Rescue Plan took you on a functioning ship and put you in a lifeboat. Okay, this Inflation Reduction Act throws you out of the lifeboat. I mean, to the point I'm trying to make to my colleagues, we work well together on things that make sense. You're the same people that told us the American Rescue Plan would save us all. It gave us a 40-year high in inflation and a recession. So to Manchin and Sinema, I admire you at times and I oppose you now. And I think what you're doing is that you're empowering the most radical people in this country to tax and spend at a time we can ill afford it. You're making it harder to get out of recession that we're in. You're going to increase gas prices, not lower them. And I think they need to be held accountable, and I intend to do that.
Senator Graham, all of you, I think, have said that we're in a recession. Today, the Labor Department said that in July we had 500,000 jobs, unemployment rate of 3.5%, as low as it's ever been. How is that consistent with the economy being in a recession right now?
The definition of a recession is negative GDP growth in 2 successive orders. Now, yes, we've got strong job growth. Isn't that great? Housing market is beginning to decline sharply. You speak to realtors, they say these interest rates are having an incredible impact. Now, I think housing is like 25% of the construction of the labor market. And by the way, when we speak of jobs, we're not talking about government bureaucrats. Some of them have been zooming from home since the pandemic started, and we don't know when they're coming back. We're talking about working Americans who typically work in manufacturing, construction, or in mining. Now, this bill goes after manufacturing. We've already spoke about half of these taxes going on manufacturers, and CBO is saying that will decrease investment in new manufacturing facilities. But construction will also go down. Interest rates correlate. So, my gosh, isn't it great? I'm very pleased that we've got strong job growth. But we're in a recession, and it doesn't take much to look forward and to see that for those Americans who rely upon, those Americans who are most susceptible to the jobs war we are apparently the Democrats are trying to lose for us, are in construction, manufacturing, and mining, we could lose those.
Yeah. And if a Republican were in charge, you wouldn't be asking that question. We'd be in a recession. So there's a common theme here. We had the lowest illegal crossings in December right after the election of 2020. In history, we've got the highest with no end in sight. The Taliban were not in charge when Trump left. They're in charge today. Contrary to what the Taliban telling you, they're working with Al-Qaeda. Now you've got the highest gas prices in maybe forever. You got a 40-year inflation spike. You think this is an accident? Do you think they're just really unlucky? Their policies are not working, and they're doubling down on policies that don't work. Go to South Carolina and tell somebody this is not a recessionary economy. Finally, to jobs. If you're able-bodied and you don't have a job in South Carolina, I can get you one by midnight. People can't find workers.
I want to make one quick point on the recession. Recession to me is when I go back home and the community bankers say, hey, Doc, what's going on? You know, business is slowing down. Why are people afraid to invest? When people in the energy sector say, we're afraid to invest monies because of your president's policies. When folks that I know that invest money for a living, when they want to grow their jobs, my natural network, who I spent the last 25 years with, were entrepreneurs, people that love the business of doing business. And they all tell me they're scared to death to invest under this current environment.
it's always good when people are working. I did note in the numbers that came out this morning that the labor force participation rate had dropped, which is, of course, a concern. And if you talk to families, they are having a harder and harder time keeping up. Because even if they're working, even if they got a bit of a raise, the raise has not kept up with the cost of inflation. And families in this country, in spite of what the president may have said, are falling further and further behind, and it's harder and harder to just keep up with where they were, certainly when he became president of the United States.
Back to the voter realm, are there any specific topics or amendments that you think put Democrats in a tough spot, something on immigration, foreign policy, China,
Energy, inflation, the border, and crime. Expect to see amendments on all of those things. Thanks so much for being here.